Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Cover One Roundup here on the Cover One YouTube channel and subsequently wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, Kyle Silagyi, today and every week joined by Cover One features writer Rob Quinn. Rob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for this show. Like we were just talking about off air, we finally have a player that we can pay $250 million to. So it's going to be a fun show, and I'm excited. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm not doing quite as well as Josh Allen, I would say, but I'm doing decently knowing, decent that it is good to know when I go to bed at night that like, hey, the Bills have a good quarterback and he's sleeping well as well. So today, as Rob alluded to, we are going to be discussing Josh Allen's new contract. It's one of the biggest contracts in NFL history. In a few categories, or in one category, it is the biggest contract in NFL history. And we're also going to be talking about the Bills' upcoming preseason matchup. Football is back on Friday night. We got a highly anticipated matchup against the Detroit Lions. And Rob, we were talking about this off air. They're looking good this year.
Oh man, if fans are worried about being ranked low on Bleacher Report's top 3 wide receiver lists, the Detroit Lions are going to be a sight to see come Friday night with the dynamic group of Tyrell Williams and Rashad Perriman and Amon-Ra St. Brown. So it's going to be an air raid.
Geronimo Allison.
Can't forget Geronimo.
An incredible team led by Jared Goff. So that's going to be a fun game to watch on Friday, and we're going to preview it. We're going to talk about a few players that we are looking forward to seeing play in this game on the Bills, the Lions. I mean, it starts and ends with Geronimo Allison for me. And we're also going to look at the storylines that we're going to be discussing, or the storylines that we're going to be looking out for in week 1 of the preseason. But before we get into any of this podcast and Cover One in general are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Rob, what do they have to what's up with Underdog Fantasy?
So Underdog Fantasy is a new fantasy football app. It's pretty awesome. I've gotten involved in a few best ball leagues over the weekend, and it's a really cool format. You basically draft like 18 players, and then it sets your lineup for you with the highest scoring players out of that group. So I'm looking forward to that. They also have player props that you can play, parlays, all sorts of things. So it'll be an awesome resource to use during the season. And if you use the code COVER1 with a deposit of $10, they will give you a free $25. So again, that's code COVER1 at Underdog Fantasy. And I'm looking forward to playing some of you guys this year.
Sounds like a profit to me. You're making money.
Trying. Someone is.
Someone's making money, yeah. I don't do sports betting because I don't dabble in spending money on things like that. I'm not good at it. So I hear an echo. If y'all hear echo, that's my beat. So Josh Allen, speaking of someone who is doing good at their job, that's not me actually, but Josh Allen signed just last week. He signed a 6-year, $258 million extension to remain with the Bills through the 2028 NFL season. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But there's a few. I don't think this is the deal that's going to get him through the 2028 season. I think he'll be on a second deal or a third deal by then, assuming things go well. I don't think he's finishing out this contract. He'll get paid a much higher sum ultimately. But as of right now, Josh Allen signs a 6-year extension, one of the highest paid players in the NFL, second highest in AAV right now, but he's not making it. He's due to make $43 million when the contract picks up in 2 years, but I don't think he will still be the second highest paid player when the contract actually kicks in. Patrick Mahomes is the highest paid quarterback, highest paid player in the league right now at $45 million. And I'm sure there will be more quarterbacks making more than $43 million. Did I say 43? I meant 45 with Mahomes. I don't know. But I think there will be more quarterbacks making more than $43 million in 2 years from now. But as of right now, Allen, due to be one of the highest paid players in the NFL, his contract has the most guarantees in NFL history at $150 million. That's crazy. Hey, good for him. He's earned it, in my opinion. And that's kind of that's kind of my thoughts on this Josh Allen contract. Is like I wasn't surprised really because Ian Rappaport came out I think last week and said this doesn't seem like a deal that's going to get done anytime soon, or there's not really any rush on either side. And that's kind of what Brandon Beane had been saying in the lead up to this. Like, there's no momentum. Allen said it'll get done when it gets done. And that's kind of what my opinion was on it. Is I was like, it's, as everyone has said, it's a matter of if. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I thought everyone knew, everyone who watches the Buffalo Bills, everyone who has any idea of what's going on with this team knew that Josh Allen was going to get paid at some point. Doesn't really matter if it's sooner or later. He was going to get paid. And it happened sooner, ultimately. So again, the money I'm not really hung up on, or, I'm not over the moon about it. I'm not really mad about it. I saw some people saying it's a team-friendly deal. I don't know if it's a team-friendly deal, but it does give the Bills, I guess it's team-friendly in that Brandon Beane, he alluded to this in his press conference, in that he now knows what he has to navigate for the next 6 years. He knows what Josh Allen's contract is going to be, so he'll know ahead of time what to work around. He'll know what his largest piece is and how he can maneuver around it. So in that sense, I guess it's team friendly. But again, he's earned this money. And Rob, you said this off air. Bills fans have wanted this for a long time. They've wanted the $43 million quarterback, or they've wanted the quarterback that, like, if he gets paid, we're like, oh, that's not an overpay. Like, oh, that's a reasonable contract. So, Rob, what are your opinions on this Josh Allen extension?
It's hard not to love this deal. And like you said, we've wanted to have to pay a quarterback $43 million forever, since the time of Jim Kelly. And usually when we've seen the players like Mario Williams signing that $100 million deal, we're like, wow, that's a lot of money. But when it came through, like, Bill's Twitter is one of the most toxic places on the internet that you can go when it comes to takes about the Bills. And when you have a collective group of this fan base who's so maniacal about the team and their debates, all being like, that's a good deal. It's for a $250 million deal that makes the player the second highest paid player in the NFL. That's something. And that's a credit to Brandon Beane and to Josh Allen, what he's done over his career thus far with the team. And I think it is a team-friendly deal in the sense that you have a player of Josh Allen's caliber and you're going to pay him that money. But the way this deal is structured, it really helps the Bills. And like Josh Allen said, he said it's a deal that both sides feel they won. Josh Allen gets his money. He gets $100 million guaranteed at signing, $150 million in guarantees. And then in Buffalo's case, they get to add a little bit of money onto this year, and then they actually lower his salary cap number next year by about $7 million, which was a big thing because they're up against the cap next year. And then in 2023, when those TV deals and the gambling money partnerships come in and spike the salary cap, that's when the money really kicks in with that option bonus that prorates for, I believe, $8.4 million over the next 5 years. So the way this deal is structured is very impressive. And it's another deal that you're not too shocked to see Brandon Beane make after seeing what he did with Tre'Davious White and Deion Dawkins and setting up the salaries in a way that can be converted into bonuses and really wiggle around the salary cap. It's really impressive, and it's great for the team. And it's, once again, he beat other teams to the jump. Like with Tre'Davious White, he was the highest paid corner in the NFL for 10 minutes
or two. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Deion Dawkins, far below value. And you see the deals that David Bakhtiari, for example, signed. And it's just incredible how Brandon Beane is finding these players at key positions. Now you have your quarterback, your left tackle, your wide receiver, corner, locked up for the foreseeable future at a decent price. Yeah. And it's very impressive to see.
I agree. I will say we had a comment here from Anthony Perello. He writes, the bonus structure is also team friendly. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's team friendly. Maybe I'm wrong. But I think anytime someone's, the second highest paid player at their position, it's difficult to call that, like, oh, he took a discount to stay here. But I don't know if anyone's saying that he took a discount to stay here. So it's just, regardless of what he was getting paid, like, he could have come in at $50 million, and I think I would have been like, oh, okay. Right. Is that an overpay? I don't know. But the fact that I'm saying I don't know is reassuring. He's not better than Patrick Mahomes, but he's in the Patrick Mahomes money territory. That's at least what I would have told you before he signed the deal. And that's, of course, what he ultimately came in around. So that's kind of my, as I said to start, that's kind of my overall thoughts on this contract is I'm not really surprised by it. It was going to get done, and it got done at roughly the prices that everyone thought it was going to get done at. So anything else to add on the Allen contract before we move on to Roundup topic number 2?
No, I think that covers it, man. Just Josh Allen just really needs to follow up on his 2020 season this year. Otherwise, the detractors are going to be out in full force like we haven't even seen before. So I'm confident in him. The team is confident in him, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does this season.
See, my fear is that, I mean, it's not a fear. I think it's going to happen. People are saying, in this particular scenario, I think this will happen. If Josh Allen regresses even a bit, which some could say you can expect that to happen because he had an insane leap last year. And there are people who say, it was an unprecedented leap, which it kind of was, but unforeseen. He was terrible in his first 2 years, and it wasn't until his third year that he was very good, and no one saw it coming. It's no, I don't think his rookie year was as bad as a lot of people thought it was. And granted, that's because I was working for the Bills that year. I was in the locker room every day, so I kind of saw what was being built. I saw the connections being made, and that team was bad. That team was bad. They cut Kelvin Benjamin midway through the year because he wasn't good enough for the team, which would kind of speak to the quality of the roster. But
right.
No, they were rolling with Zay Jones and Isaiah McKenzie at the end of the year as their 1-2. So Josh Allen had to make it work in other ways, which 2018 is when I started coming around to Dable, when I started coming around to Allen, because he got 6 wins out of what should have been a 2 or 3 win team. And then 2019, he was serviceable, wasn't great. But, the jump wasn't unexpected to me. Was it better than expected? Maybe, but that type of leap wasn't unexpected. So if he does regress even the slightest next year, not 4,500 yards, 40 passing touchdowns, I think there are going to be, the national people who come out and say, oh, I wish you wouldn't, or, probably wish you wouldn't have given him that deal. And it's well, you have to. You have to. Right. After the season Allen just had, you have to pay him like this. So I'm fine with it. I like the deal. We have somebody writing a communist manifesto proudly on display, Kyle. See, this was the joke for this week for those watching live. We have communist manifesto here, and then back here, Josh Allen was underpaid. Just kind of the 1-2, if you will. So moving on to Roundup topic number 2. CJ Henderson. He could be on the move. The Jacksonville Jaguars are reportedly shopping the now second-year cornerback who they took with the 9th overall pick in the 2020 NFL draft. Now, I just want to quickly touch on this because I don't want this to be one of those shows where, every time a player of note is available, we're should the Bills get him? I just don't. It's not realistic, and I don't want to be that type of show. But CJ Henderson's interesting because he is so young, he is so talented, and it's not very often that you see a top 10 pick get shopped, reportedly, a year after he's taken. Now, he did miss some time last year, missed half the season. He got placed on IR midway through the season, only played in 8 games. But, I mean, he was a top 10 pick. And there were a couple people on draft Twitter a year ago. I saw some people who I respected saying that he was better than Jeff Okudah of the wonderful Detroit Lions who the Bills are playing this week. So he's a solid young corner, but I don't know if Buffalo is a realistic destination. So again, just quickly, Rob, how do you feel about CJ Henderson, A, being on the move in general, and B, are the Bills a realistic destination?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, Urban Meyer's there now. The team just spent a lot of money on Shaquille Griffin, Tyson Campbell, drafted in the first round this year. So corner is now a position of strength for them, and Henderson just might be the odd guy out from a previous regime. But going back to his tape at Florida, I really liked him coming out. He's got size 6'1", 210 pounds, I think. He's fast, runs 4.3. But he's more of a man coverage corner. I don't know how good he is in a zone-heavy scheme. And also with the Bills, I don't think they're looking to pay top 10 draft pick money. Now, they wouldn't have to pay the bonus because the Jags would eat that, but it's still a significant amount of money for a corner that hasn't really proven much and might not fit their scheme.
I agree. It's a fun idea, and the potential of it is fun. Like, this was a top 10 pick. Imagine if they can bring Henderson in opposite Trey White, and Henderson develops like we think he's going to develop, and you have two lockdown corners or two cornerback one potential players on each side flanking. So it's an interesting idea, but like you said, the money, the Bills, I think, are kind of tight as it is already up against the cap, or they're not. They have some breathing room, and I don't know if they want to use the breathing room on a guy like C.J. Henderson when they're comfortable with Levi Wallace, as we've talked about on this show. They're more than comfortable with Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson, pushing him. So again, it's a fun idea, but I don't know if it's a move the Bills would make. And I also don't know if they have the capital, but I don't know what the Jags are asking for C.J. Henderson. I don't think anyone knows what the Jags are asking for C.J. Henderson. But day 2 pick, I'd call, but I don't know if I'd make the move.
Right. I don't disagree.
All right. So here we go. We're moving on to the follow-up segment, as I wrote in the the show lineup. It is the players to watch in the Buffalo Bills preseason opener against, as we said, the Detroit Lions. Rob and I have 2 players each who we are going to be focusing on as the Bills take to the field this Friday evening. So, Rob, I'll let you kick off here. Who is your first player to watch this weekend?
So the first preseason game, we're probably not going to see a whole lot of the starters, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on Justin Zimmer when he's in the game, defensive tackle. I think that he's going to get some real run. The Bills behind Ed Oliver and Star Lotulelei don't really know what they have at D tackle. We don't know how many they're going to keep. They might keep just 3 this season due to the versatility from their D ends. And that'll come down, if they do decide to go that route, it'll be Zimmer versus Harrison Phillips. But Zimmer is a player that I'm excited about this year, and the coaching staff seems to be too. Leslie Frazier brought him up last week saying he's a tough guy to keep out. And last year he was impressive. He played, I think, only 330 defensive snaps, but he was impactful in all those. He had 23 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a forced fumble. He had 23 pressures. He led the team in quarterback hits with 7. And I just think he's a solid all-around depth player that has great value for this team. And I think in the preseason, especially against an offensive line like the Lions that is just dreadful, he can eat. And I think Zimmer is going to be a guy to really keep an eye on Friday night.
Oh, for sure. Justin Zimmer is an interesting player to me because, again, we've gone through 2 podcasts at this point. I don't think either of us have said the name Justin Zimmer. He's just an under-the-radar guy, but he's firmly in the roster bubble status, probably leaning towards making the roster. I wouldn't say that, actually, but he's interesting because, like you said, Leslie Frazier said he's going to be a tough guy to keep out. He doesn't get all the reps, but he's impactful when he's given the opportunity. And I've done a few 53-man mocks just, in Microsoft Word, not published anywhere. Just, a couple different scenarios to see potentially if they roll with this many defensive linemen, what's the result going to be? Or, if they roll with 4 running backs, what's the result going to be? And Justin Zimmer, for me, is consistently left off of those 53-man rosters. Even when I have 4 DTs, it's hard to fit Justin Zimmer in there. With Ed's a lock, Star's a lock, Harrison Phillips probably a lock, and then Vernon Butler, maybe, or Justin Zimmer. I think it's more likely that the 3rd defensive tackle gets cut, as you were alluding to. I think it's more likely that the 3rd defensive tackle gets cut, or the 4th defensive tackle gets cut. Sorry, no, they're going to have at least 3 defensive tackles, but I think it's more likely that the 4th gets cut and they roll with a versatile defensive end as well, like an F.A. Obata. I'm still hoping they find a way to get Daryl Johnson on this roster. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm hoping that they find a way to make it happen. And if he's on the roster, Justin Zimmer isn't. So again, he's just a guy who is consistently under the radar for me, despite the fact that he's been impactful in a limited role. So it's going to be interesting to see it seems like the Bills coaching staff, as you said, already likes him. So I don't know what he has to prove to them, but let's see if he can prove to me. I don't know what I don't know what that's worth, but let's see if he can come out in the week 1 of the preseason, like you said, against not a great Lions offensive line as it is, and when you get later in preseason games, the bottom of the roster defensive line is usually more talented than the bottom of the roster offensive line. So that's why you get defensive linemen getting pretty good stats or putting on shows in preseason. So I think does that wrap up Justin Zimmer talk? I know it was electric.
Yep.
I know the people love Justin Zimmer. Huge play against the Patriots. He snapped that streak. But okay, we'll see. Maybe we'll talk about him more next week. Let's see what he can do. My first player to watch is the player that everyone's been watching this preseason. It's Jake Kumro. But I am not watching him for the reason it's the reason he's good. He's done well, but I'm more interested in, is this hype real or is this hype manufactured? This is something that we discussed in the Cover One, or I didn't discuss. I read a conversation between people about this, and it was interesting. So I'm talking about it on the podcast. Is this hype real or is it manufactured? Did Jake Kumro just come in and, out of nowhere, just come into training camp and, like a bat out of hell and just is playing well and is going to make it, make his roster spot undeniable? Or is this a case of he kind of had a little hype coming into training camp with the whole Aaron Rodgers situation, and there's kind of a concerted effort on behalf of the Bills to make the hype a little more? Put him in situations to succeed with a quarterback like Josh Allen, put him out, replace Stephon Diggs with him in the first public practice when Stephon Diggs has an off day. So give Jake Kumro the reps and have Josh Allen make a nice throw or two to Jake Kumro. So is this a scenario where Brandon Beane is trying to build up the hype a little bit around Jake Kumro so he can then trade him for a day 2 or day 3 pick? I don't think he's getting a 3rd-round pick for Jake Kumro, and if he does, he is something else. But, is this a scenario where they are just trying to hype up Jake Kumro so they can trade him later on for like a 5th or a 6th-round pick? Not dissimilar to the Sammy Watkins situation from a few years ago when Sammy Watkins, everyone was questioning, is his foot healthy? Is his foot healthy? Came out in the first game of the 2017 preseason. I think Tyrod targeted him like 3 or 4 times. He made every catch, then he gets traded the next day. So I don't know if Jake Kumro's getting traded on Saturday necessarily, but the hype, it's a little strange at this point. Like if he has just come in and just outworked everyone and outplayed everyone and now he's a roster lock, that's great. That's a great story and I'm happy with it. But I wouldn't be surprised if this was a little bit of manufactured hype on behalf of Jake Kumro. Or not on behalf of Jake Kumro, on behalf of the Bills. So we're going to see how he's used this week. As you said, the ones probably won't get that much run. But let's see how is he used with the ones. Does Mitch Trubisky ultimately make Jake Kumro look like a star? So I'm just going to be intrigued to see his role. If he's only on there for, 1 or 2 series with Josh Allen, maybe that's pointing towards the fact that no, he's just good and he's just here to stay. So we'll see. I'm intrigued to see what Jake Kumro does this week, how they use Jake Kumro, and ultimately, his roster status. Has he played himself onto the roster or has he played himself onto a different roster? So what are your thoughts on the Jake Kumro hype? Is it real?
That's a good scenario that you brought up. I didn't see that conversation in the Slack channel, but it makes sense. Like you said, they're showcasing them. I mean, obviously they have their top 4 receivers set and teams aren't really using their 5th or 6th guy other than on special teams or in the return game. And Kumaro is a guy that has made headlines every single practice, it seems, for a great catch or great plays or against our top corners. So it's definitely something to watch during the game. If he's used just on a few series, like you said, then it's probably safe to say that they really like him. But if he's playing later in the game, it might just be to get tape out on him for other teams to make a deal. But on the other hand, it's like the Bills want to see what they have in Isaiah Hodgins. They want to see what they have in Marquez Stevenson and Tanner Gentry and guys like that. And they're all getting reps, and maybe they're getting similar numbers that we're just not seeing. But I don't think that the Bills are going to really shake up their team just to get a 6th or 7th round pick for a guy. But it will be interesting to see what happens.
No, that's a good point. Like with the Sammy situation, that was a 2nd round pick. So it's like, and you weren't expecting to be good that year anyway. So you can mess up the first preseason game for a 2nd round draft pick. Yeah. If you're like a Super Bowl ambition team, you're not messing with your
you're not playing
strategy.
Games in practice with a bubble receiver.
That's not worth it. So, but hey, we'll see.
It's fun to talk about.
Exactly. And like, if Jake Kumro really has been this good, and you have a 5th receiver who could be a 3rd or maybe even not a 2nd guy, but a 3rd or 4th guy on other teams, that's a good thing to have. So like at one point, it's like, would I rather the receiver than the 6th round draft pick? So these are all things that Brandon Beane is going to have to think about, and I'm sure he has. He's a smart guy. So Rob, who is your 2nd player to watch this weekend?
My 2nd player to watch this weekend is Devin Singletary. He is, I wouldn't say he's necessarily on the hot seat in terms of losing his spot on the roster, but he's definitely on the hot seat in terms of a starting job and really having a big role on offense this season. Zach Moss has, by all accounts, been the best running back in training camp by far. He got the majority of the reps with the ones in the scrimmage on Saturday, and he seems fully healthy. And for all the work that Devin Singletary has supposedly put in during the offseason, like, he really needs to step up and prove that it wasn't all for naught. I mean, he put on a lot of size, and for a guy that's kind of smaller and already slow and not that explosive, it's a question that maybe he get too big and he's trying to do, and it's going to be a negative for him. I don't know. But on Friday night, Devin Singletary really needs to step up and make some plays, because guys like Matt Breida, Antonio Williams, and Christian Wade are going to get a lot of touches. So Singletary is going to have to really show that he can be that 1B and not the 2.
You think Christian Wade's going to get a lot of touches?
It's preseason. Yeah,
that's my hot take.
The first preseason, 4th quarter, it's Christian Wade time. We know that.
Oh, I think he's good for like 3 touches, and he's going to score on each of them. That's the hot take. You'll hear it later in the show. But yeah, I liked Devin Singletary more at this time last year than I do now, if that makes sense. I thought he was real good coming out. Like, I remember, this is the 2nd time I'm bringing this up on the show, but when I was an intern for the Bills.
Humble brag.
I know, right? But no, when I was covering the 2019 draft, and I remember being in the media room, and they drafted Devin Singletary, and I was like, oh, he kind of reminds me of like Shady McCoy a little bit. And then Brandon Beane comes out, and he's like, oh, he kind of reminded us of Shady a little bit. And I was like, I'm not stupid. I'm not entirely stupid. That's crazy. But yeah, I liked him a bunch, and I thought he looked good in his rookie year. Last year, Zach Moss kind of, for me at least, was the guy who I liked toward the end of the season, because they were using him in more high-pressure situations, or more running-focused situations is when they use Zach Moss. So, look, I like Devin Singletary fine. I just think Zach Moss is the better option for this team. I think you're right. I think it's going to be interesting to see if he can be the 1B and not the 2. I think that was a very good way to put it, because, as we've said, I think it is going to be running back by committee. But, I mean, if Matt Breida is bringing something more than Devin Singletary is, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that Matt Breida supplants Devin Singletary. I mean, Devin Singletary is not going to get cut. I don't think he's going to get traded. But I could see scenarios, or at least in some games, where Matt Breida gets more touches than Devin Singletary does. So, he's going to be a guy to watch not only this week, but just throughout all of preseason and the rest of training camp. Can he reclaim that spot as 1B? Or I don't know if he's lost it yet, but can he secure a stranglehold on that 1B title? Because I think Zach Moss, unless something happens, unless some really unforeseen circumstances come up, I think Zach Moss is probably 1A going into week 1, and we'll see how the rest of the touches divvy up in the backfield between Breida and Singletary. So, any more Singletary talk?
Nope, you covered it.
That's a first. My 2nd player to watch, and I know I bring him up far too often on this podcast, far more than is warranted. It's Jake Fromm, because this is the first time the Bills fans are seeing Jake Fromm. They spent a 5th or 6th round draft pick on him in 2020. I didn't love the pick then. And now, after hearing how he's been in training camp, like his first year training camp and now this year training camp, like, I'm not, as I've said on the first episode, I'm not convinced he makes this team. I'm really not convinced he makes this team. With Trubisky, he's the backup, and then Davis Webb, who's kind of a coach on the field. I don't know why this team carries 3 quarterbacks on the active roster, given the fact that extra roster spot could be used on another defensive lineman or, something else. And I don't see why you keep 2 quarterbacks on the practice squad. Do you need 2 guys running the scout team? Like, what kind of weird offensive scheme are you cooking up in scout team that you got 2 quarterbacks out there? But, and like Jake Fromm, like, he's not even like, the type of guy that you keep around because he has a skill set that can mimic other quarterbacks. Like,
yeah, he's not the toolsy type of guy.
Exactly.
We can develop him. Yeah.
Right. He's also not, Ray McLeod. He's not, we can use him as Lamar Jackson in scout team. Jeez, I forgot that term. I used it so often in the last 2 minutes that I forgot the term. But yeah, as I said, this is the first time that Bills fans are going to see him play on the field in a Bills uniform. And I'm just not really sold on Jake Fromm. I wasn't sold on him coming out of Georgia, not sold on him now. And again, he doesn't, from what we've heard coming out of training camp, it doesn't seem like he's a world beater. Doesn't seem like he's lighting the world on fire by any means. So we're going to see probably a lot of him this week, I would say. It's probably going to be him and Davis Webb taking the majority of the reps, if I would have to guess, because Mitch Trubisky, what you have in Mitch Trubisky for the most part. You see 4 years of tape on Mitch Trubisky. Or is it 5 years? No, it's 4.
I think 4.
You know what Mitch Trubisky is. Again, you can get him some go with the, receivers, his new team and whatever. But I think for the most part, you need to see who's going to be your third quarterback, Webb or Fromm. And I just think Webb brings more off the field. And also, he's not unathletic. Davis Webb is more athletic than Jake Fromm is, at least, I think. So Jake Fromm, I think, is going to need a strong preseason to even get a spot on this practice squad because I don't see him making the active roster. But they could prove me wrong, but I don't see how he's on the 53, and it's really he's going to need a strong preseason, and that starts this week.
Right, and we talked about Fromm a little bit, I think, 2 weeks ago, and like I said then, I think the only reason they drafted Fromm, like Bean said, was because he was just the player on the board that was that value at that time. It wasn't like they were looking for a quarterback or anything, and the only reason I think they would keep him going forward would be just so when they lose Trubisky after this season, they have someone that already knows the system. But Fromm hasn't really sounded like he's done much of anything in any of the training camp practices so far. I haven't heard even a little side note in an article about he made a nice pass and this. Like, it's just been quiet other than just some bad throws. So I think this preseason game is a chance to really see what he's capable of. And like you said, I don't think he's going to be on the roster going forward.
Yeah, I would say it's unfortunate, but I don't know. I don't know. But like I understand what people say, like, oh, he's a developmental quarterback. He's the long-term backup. He was the long-term replacement for Matt Barkley. But like, is that a guy that you want on your roster? Like, oh, we're developing the next Matt Barkley. Like, I'm not saying they have if they have similar skill sets or whatever, or if that's his ceiling, I don't know. But like, I don't know if on a Super Bowl competitive team, as I've said, your long-term developmental backup quarterback, I'm not using a 53-man roster spot on that. And given what we've seen from Jake Fromm, I don't know if I'm using a practice squad roster spot on that. So he's going to need a strong preseason. So that's why I'm intrigued to watch him. Because he's a quarterback and there's going to be a bit of hype around him regardless. But he's going to need a strong preseason, as I said. So
for sure.
That wraps up the players to watch segment. We're now moving on to the second segment, or the third segment, technically. It is the storylines that we're going to be watching in week 1. The stories that Rob and I are going to be focusing on as we watch this game and probably rewatch it. So, Rob, what's your first storyline here?
Well, I want to see if the offensive line gets their kneecaps bitten off by Dan Campbell's defense, And I want to see the lineups that they use on the offensive line. Obviously, who comes out as a starting five? I think we all know that Cody Ford and John Feliciano are probably going to get the first reps there. But I'm interested to see how Ike Butker fares. I've seen that he's been mixing in, rotating with John Feliciano at guard this week, which is interesting now because we talked about that week one of our podcast. And I don't think Feliciano or Ford are safe. And this is a real competition for both guard spots. So I don't think that the starting five to open the game really matters, but I'm interested to see if they kind of rotate guys in and out for series. Because we've seen them do that before with Ford and Ty Nsekhe at tackle. And I think they're going to give a few guys a shot with the first team offense to really prove what they can do. So the offensive line combinations are going to be something that I'm really focused on Friday night.
I agree, but do you think we can really trust what we see, or do you think it's going to be like, oh, we're kind of hiding a little bit what we want to do? Really?
No, I don't think the starting five matters, but I do think that they're going to put different combinations in with starters. Like, we don't know if Deion Dawkins is going to play, so we're probably going to see Spencer Brown at left tackle, which is going to be fun. But then at the guard spots with Cody Ford, John Feliciano, and Ike Butker, that's going to be very interesting to see not only who comes out first, but what the unit looks like on the second and maybe even third drive. Because if they're keeping the starting guys in and then maybe Feliciano comes out of right guard and Butker goes in, but Cody Ford's still out there and the rest of the starting five are there, then that's something to say, okay, this is a real competition. But if they stay the starting five and then you see Butker come out and it's all the twos with him, then I think that's an indicative of what they're really feeling going forward as well. So, I mean, preseason, you don't want to put everything on tape, but I think there's value in the reps you get against a different team that you don't see in practice.
Yeah, for sure. I'm just excited to see Ryan Bates.
Yeah.
Is this the Ryan Bates year? They've been trying to make Ryan Bates a thing.
It could be. It sounds like he's only working at center for the most part, though, behind Morris. But I think he can play both guard spots too. So
yeah, I don't really have anything to add to the offensive line. You pretty much summed it up perfectly there. There definitely is value in using the preseason to test out different combinations. And as you said, don't trust everything.
As long as Bobby Hart isn't out there with Josh Allen at the same time, I'll be good.
Well, would you rather Spencer Brown out there?
At this rate, from what we've seen of Bobby Hart,
forever. Yeah. Not just in training camp, just in general.
Right.
But yes, cosign. I'm going to switch over. Yes, I am. I'm going to flip over to the defensive line. And the thing I'm going to be watching, among numerous other things, but one of the things we're going to be focusing on this week is the defensive line alignment and where they use certain guys. And again, as we were talking about with the offensive line, you can't trust everything. They're not going to put everything on tape. I don't think they're going to be, dishing up some weird, third down pass rush package with Rousseau and Obata rushing from the inside. I don't know if we're going to be seeing that this week, but just in general, I'm intrigued to see where Rousseau gets his snaps, where Obata gets his snaps, where Daryl Johnson gets his snaps. Does he get defensive snaps? He will, but what does he make of those? Basham, what he can do. And also guys like a Justin Zimmer, which you previewed pretty well earlier, and like Harrison Phillips. I'm intrigued to see how he comes back in his second year off that injury, which he's looking good. I think he said he's like 3 or 4 pounds heavier. I would say it's a little, it looks like a little more to me. He is jacked this year. Vernon Butler, can he play his way back onto this roster? I don't know what we're going to see from him in the preseason week 1 at least, but just the defensive line alignment in general. And I wrote down the names here: Obata, Rousseau, and Basham. That's who I'm focusing on this week, how they use them. Because as we were talking about with the defensive tackle spots, like there's a scenario where they only have 3. There's a scenario where Justin Zimmer or Vernon Butler gets cut because Obata, is too good to keep off the roster, or Daryl Johnson plays his way onto the roster. So I'm going to say it 5 times. Just how they use these new versatile pieces with length that they talked about all offseason, with them saying on numerous occasions, Frazier, McDermott, everyone really saying that they needed length, that hopefully that missing piece for some pass rushing production is length and versatility, which they get out of these guys. It's kind of what's been hyped up about them. So in their first opportunity to showcase that length and versatility from numerous positions, that's what I'm intrigued to see what they do. So what are your thoughts on the defensive line in week 1 of the preseason?
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch Rousseau go out there. I don't think they're going to really kick him inside much. I mean, they might, but just based on the Bills and their tight media reporting of video and things like that from training camp, I don't think that they're going to want to put much on tape in terms of their exotic blitzes and sub packages. But it's going to be fun to see the new players. It always is the first preseason game to see them in the uniform for the first time and lined up. But I'm excited to watch the defensive line. I think that's what everyone's looking forward to see because there's just so many players with talent there, and really seeing where these guys get their snaps and how late in the game they play will be telling for those 53-man roster projections. So I think you covered it nicely. But yeah, I'm excited to see them Friday.
For sure. Obata. A few months ago, I was like, oh, no, he's not making the roster. Then I started listening to the Cover One guys. Mm-hmm. All you guys are just like, oh, yeah, F.A. Obata is real good. Going to be hard to keep off this roster. So now I'm like, oh, I'm intrigued to see what he can do. I'm intrigued to see if he is going to be that hard to keep off the roster with his versatility, his speed, his power. He's going to be a fun guy to watch, even just regardless of how they use him. He's going to be a fun player to watch against whatever string offensive tackles of the Detroit Lions. So he's going to be a fun player to watch. So, Rob, what's your second storyline?
Kind of under the radar. We all know about Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano, and they're not going anywhere. They're not at risk of losing their jobs. They're going to play all the snaps pretty much. But I do want to see what their depth at linebacker looks like. Both Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano have dealt with some injuries, and their reserve linebackers have been forced to play significant roles in the last couple of years. So I do want to see what they have behind those guys. Tyler Matakevich was getting a lot of work with the second team last week. But the new guy, Tyrell Dodson, who played last year for Tremaine Edmonds, I just want to see how those guys stack up and what unit they're with, and really what positions they're playing and just how they look on the field. Like I said, Milano and Edmonds aren't going anywhere. I don't want anyone to think I'm watching the linebackers because of that, but it's just going to be fun. I like for anyone that's followed me over the years, I like the long shot guys with no shot. So I'm excited to watch these second and third string guys.
Well, for a while, as writers, that's the only thing that was interesting,
right?
The long shot guys with fun stories. But yeah, the linebacker room or the linebacker position, it's interesting. Mainly for me, because we did see Tyler Matakevich and Andre Smith getting run with the second teams. If you asked me to make a depth chart at the beginning of training camp, they would not have been there. I don't know where they would have been, but they wouldn't have been with the second team.
Right, so, Smith probably wouldn't have even been on the team. So
they traded for him, didn't they? They gave him, or no, they didn't. They didn't. Well, they technically did. They traded a conditional pick, and then they cut him, and then they re-signed him, so they didn't have to give up the pick. So again, 4D chess, Brandon Bean. But yeah, Andre Smith is just kind of I would say he's a roster long shot. Tyler Matakevich isn't a roster long shot, but that's because of his special teams ability. That that's not because of anything he brings defensively. So again, we did discuss this a bit last week, but it could just be if we're in a pinch, could Tyler Matakevich give us anything defensively? Hopefully it's that. But Tyrell Adams, who's kind of an under the radar player for a little bit. It'll be interesting to see what he does here in his Bills debut. And Tyrell Dodson, as I said last week, I like Tyrell Dodson. I thought he played solid last year in what's the word? In place. There we go. Jeez. In place of Tremaine Edmonds when he was hurt. And just a maturing young man. So it'll be interesting to see what he's able to do here and where he plays, because as I said last week, I thought he was a roster lock entering camp. So we'll see. Mm-hmm. We'll see what he's able to do here in training or in the first preseason game. My second storyline, unless you have anything else to add on the linebackers,
nope.
What I thought.
Take it away.
I thought we wrapped that up pretty well. My second storyline, highly anticipated. I know all the comments are about what's Kyle's second storyline. They're rolling in. My second storyline is Dane Jackson. Where they use him, obviously it's going to be in the outside with the second team. But like how he plays, because we didn't discuss, our podcast wasn't going on then, but in the lead up to training camp, it was discussed that Dane Jackson realistically could push Levi Wallace for this second cornerback job. And through training camp so far, that hasn't been the case. There's kind of been a growing gap between Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson. And from what everyone's saying, it's because of consistency. Like Levi Wallace, just as he always does, just going out there and doing his job, playing well. Whereas Dane Jackson, he'll have a few flash plays, but it's not consistent. And thus, I think at the scrimmage this last week or at a practice, Levi Wallace got 100% of the first team reps. Dane Jackson did not take the field with the ones. So I don't think Dane Jackson will take the field with the ones this week either. But as we said, I think he is going to see a lot of reps because I don't think the ones are getting that much time. And last week on Cover One Buffalo, Greg Thompson was joined by Sal Capaccio, and Sal brought up a good point. He's like, he said it'll be interesting to see if Dane Jackson is just a gamer, and when pads come on, is that when he comes on? Is he just a better player in games than he is in practice? Which there are plenty of guys like that. So I'm intrigued to see if Dane Jackson can close this gap. Because it's going to have to be in the preseason games at this point. Because in training camp, on the practice field, it's not really working out for him. He's not bad, but Levi Wallace has just been more consistent and thus has secured, at least thus far, has held on to his incumbency, has held on to that number 2 cornerback job opposite Tre'Davious White. So if Dane Jackson is to make up that ground, it's going to have to be in the preseason, and he's going to get his opportunity to do it this week. I like Dane Jackson. I think he's an intriguing player. Again, same with Justin Zimmer, impactful in an even more limited role than Justin Zimmer was in last year. Dane Jackson was on the practice squad most of the year, so was Justin Zimmer, but you get what I'm saying. Dane Jackson, an intriguing story, intriguing player. I liked him coming into this training camp. I thought he was going to give Wallace more of a push than he has thus far, so let's see if he can ramp it up here. They don't have a great receiving core, like in general. So, like, even when he's facing second-team guys, I don't know, like, how big of a grain of salt we have to take it with.
Right, he's going to be lined up with Quintez Cephas or Victor Bolden.
Bill's great.
Right, with David Blow throwing passes. So, I mean, it's going to be tough. But like you said, I don't think that's to discredit anything because you're going to get to see his technique and how he sticks to these guys and reads his keys and all those things. But I like Dane Jackson. He's intriguing. And even if he's not really closing ground for a starting job, it's still a great problem to have when you have such a tight competition there. Obviously, Levi Wallace, you'd love him to be a guy that comes in, plays 100% of the snaps as a lockdown guy, but someone that can kind of give him a breather and step right in, and like Dane Jackson and make plays. I mean, that's a great problem to have. So like you said, I don't think he could be a gamer, but the competition that he's facing this week probably isn't going to give him much.
Right. It's not like an accurate tell. But like CJ, going back to CJ Henderson, like having a guy like Dane Jackson even, and I'm not saying, the Bills have Dane Jackson, they shouldn't trade for CJ Henderson because that's silly. But like just having a guy like Dane Jackson or having a cornerback situation like the Bills currently have, it makes like a trade or even the addition of a second cornerback. I mean, that's why they really didn't go after a second cornerback in the offseason, is because their quarterback situation isn't as dire as a lot of people make it out to be. Like Levi Wallace is serviceable, and then you have a young and hungry, talented guy like Dane Jackson pushing him. Like that's opposite Trey White, one of the top corners in the league. So that's kind of an admirable position to be in, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And then even behind him, Saran Neal, Leslie Frazier saying they want a role for him, but they can't get Taron Johnson off the field. So we're creating this need for starters when the coaches are trying to get the backups a role because they're so confident in the starters. So the Bills are in a great position now. It's just crazy to be talking about second and third stringers that could start elsewhere, and they're really pushing for a job this preseason. So it's going to be fun to watch.
Right, this isn't a scenario we've been in before. These are uncharted waters. I mean, usually, like we're looking at other teams rosters at this point. Like, okay, who's a potential odd man out there who could come in and play meaningful snaps here? This year, it's the opposite. It's going to be who are the Bills going to cut that's going to get meaningful snaps elsewhere. So
definitely.
Just any what did I just say? It just sounded like a auctioneer. But any other storylines you're going to be watching, or just things in general that you're looking out for this week?
I think we covered it. Probably the punt returns. I want to see Marquez Stevenson field a couple punts. Really, just everything in general you want to see. It's football's back. It's a team that's fighting for the Super Bowl, but there's so many little competitions everywhere for the bottom of the roster, which isn't as flashy to national media, but I'm pumped to see it because I really am interested to see how the bottom of this roster is formed when it comes to the 53 man.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to do like another, not player feature here, but I'm intrigued to see how they use Saran because he's a guy who he's a teamer. That's mainly how he's been used thus far. But he's a guy who defensively is kind of positionless, or not. I wouldn't say positionless because maybe the issue is that he has too many positions. Like he was like a safety linebacker hybrid at Jacksonville State, and then he comes out, plays a little safety, plays a little nickel, and plays a little boundary. So, like as you said, Leslie Frazier wants to get him a role defensively. What do you think that role is for Sarandio?
I think he's best suited in the slot, where he can play man coverage. He can fill against the run because when you see him on special teams, he's a freaking dog. Like he is fast and physical and just relentless out there. And you see that energy that you don't really see from a lot of players. And now maybe his technique isn't up there, and that's why he's not getting on the field. But I think the Bills like what they have in him, and they just need to figure out a way that they can get him on the field defensively. And when I interviewed him for Cover One here about a month or two ago, he was saying that like it's a numbers game, and he's ready when his name's called. And we saw that against the Chiefs when he matched up with Kelsey a little bit. So I think he's that bigger athletic guy that can maybe help defend tight ends or even come in and run situations as a sub package guy and fill against the run. But it's just another interesting player, and I like what you said about him being positionless. But the Bills' defense is kind of going in that direction, aren't they? With the defensive line playing so many roles, they got corners that can play inside and out. Their safeties are interchangeable, linebackers too. So if they can get Saran Neal on the field, or if he gets the opportunity to, I think that he can do a lot of different things for them.
Yeah, you summed it up better than I could. But yeah, I like Saran Neal. I like the athleticism. I like the potential of Saran Neal. Mm-hmm. And again, he's going to make the roster because, like you said, he's a dog on special teams. But it's a numbers game. I don't know if this is the year that they carve out a role for him on special teams, and he's a free agent at the end of this year. And if you see Leslie Frazier get a head coaching job, which I don't know if it's going to happen, but you can see Saran Neal get a deal elsewhere, like where he could play defense. Or
they let Taron Johnson walk and re-sign Saran Neal to a small special teams deal and put him in.
That would be a move. That would be something. Like I'm not crazy about Taron Johnson, but I'm also not crazy about that. I need to see him in the slot. That's what the preseason's for. Here we go. Wow, it all comes full circle. Let's hope he plays well in the slot. Who are their tight ends in Detroit? Even Hawkinson, which he's not going to see.
Hawkinson, Darren Fells, and Alize Mack.
Oh well, Saran.
Now's your time to shine, baby.
So now it's time for, again, everyone's favorite segment. It's the hot take segment. Rob, it looks like your take this week is a little hotter than mine, so I will let you lead off. What's your hot take for Bills preseason week 1?
That's funny because I don't think it's that hot of a take, but I do think the Bills defense gets 5 sacks at least against the Detroit Lions. I think, like F.A. Obata said today, it's going to be a race to get to the quarterback with all the talent and depth that they have. And like you said earlier, in the preseason, you see defensive guys load up the stat sheet as the game goes on because defensive players our defensive linemen are just so much more athletic than the offensive linemen because the position as a whole is so top heavy in the NFL, and backup offensive linemen are not good, and third and fourth string linemen are even worse. So you're looking at guys like Justin Zimmer and Daryl Johnson and F.A. Obata potentially going up against guys like Tyrell Crosby and Dan Skipper and Darren Paulo. Like these guys, the Lions are bad. Their first stringers are bad, let alone their second and third. Now they have Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell, who could be a franchise player, but the interior is terrible, and behind them it's a rough roster. And I think the Bills defense is gonna feast.
Yeah, I hope Daryl feasts. I mean, look, you guys know, everyone knows I'm a Daryl Johnson guy, huge Daryl Johnson guy.
Are you?
I'm one of the bigger Daryl Johnson fans, I would say. But again, his path to the 53 is rough. But like, if they could trade him for a 7th round draft pick, like if it turns out to be an investment, like they picked him in the 7th round and then turned him into a 7th round draft pick, I can't complain. That's just, again, 4D chess. But I hope it's not going to happen. But I hope Daryl Johnson makes this roster, and if he does, I will break the news again, like I did last year. I don't know if you knew that, Rob. I had the Daryl Johnson scoop last year.
I didn't know that.
I was in his Instagram Live, which he does a lot. He's always on Instagram Live, and he was happy. It was roster cutdown day, and he was happy. And I just wrote big ups on making the roster, and he pinned it. And I was like, that's a scoop. And I broke the scoop, and I was right. I did journalism that day, Big J journalism. So let me double check what my hot take is. Yes, my hot take. It's a burner. My hot take is that the Christian Wade hype train picks up steam yet again this weekend. Christian Wade. Again, I don't know if you remember, the world was a much different place in 2019 than it is now. But 2019 preseason, Christian Wade had a touchdown in week 1, I believe, on like a screen pass or something.
Against the Colts, right?
Yes, that might have been the handoff. And then the next week, he had a screen pass go for a big chunk of yardage. And then the week after, he didn't play at all. Or he didn't ever play again. I don't think he touched the ball again. But like, there were people genuinely asking, can Christian Wade crack this roster? No. And I don't know if he still can. But he might know how to play football now. But I think this weekend, again, 4th quarter, 5 minutes left, Christian Wade gets a Jake Fromm screen pass, and he just goes. He makes everyone miss. This time he doesn't run into a tackle, or maybe he does like a rugby move and he laterals it back to someone, and we're like, oh, he's combining the games. This is revolutionary stuff from Christian Wade. But he's going to do something crazy this weekend, because that's what we deserve as Bills fans. We deserve crazy Christian Wade highlights in the 4th quarter of preseason games. And then the hype train is going to start back up. There's going to be people saying he's more effective than Matt Breida is, at least. Or, like maybe he can be the teamer that Tywan Jones is. And it's going to be great. And we're going to discuss it next week here on this podcast. Can Christian Wade crack this roster?
Bring me all the chaos, and I'm all on board with Christian Wade to getting a 50-yard screen to the house. So
it's going to be wonderful. And someone writes here, what if Fromm tears it up in the preseason games?
Then the Allen deal is an albatross. I'm kidding.
If Jake Fromm tears it up in the preseason, it's going to be on the back of Christian Wade. Okay? Take that one to the house. And Elijah writes, he'll be traded for a late round pick. If they can turn Christian Wade into a 7th round draft pick to the Lions, that's what's going to happen. Is Motor City Dan Campbell's going to watch this game, see how much of a dog Christian Wade is. He's just going to be evading, 4th and 5th string linebackers, just making them look like fools. And he's going to say, I need that guy on my team. How come I've never heard of him? And he's going to be like, because he plays rugby. He's not a football player. And he's going to be like 3rd round pick for Christian Wade. And it's going to be, again, it comes full circle again here to wrap up this week's Cover One Roundup podcast. Again, we're here live every Monday at 9 p.m., and we appreciate those who did watch this week. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the Cover One YouTube channel. Please rate and review on iTunes if you want to. If not, that's fine as well. It would just be appreciated. Make sure you bookmark cover1.net. Make sure you subscribe or look into Cover One Premium We've got some great content over there. Always cooking some stuff up. Rob, you cooking up anything right now besides the AJ Epinesa piece that just came out today?
Not cooking anything right now. Probably going to do a little preview for the Lions game, building on some other stuff that we didn't touch on tonight. So check it out.
We touched on most things.
Most things, but
we got some
going
Justin Zimmer talking there.
Yeah.
So yeah, make sure to follow Cover One. Make sure to follow all the Cover One people. Rob, where can people follow you?
Follow me on Twitter at RobQuinn619.
You can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Silagyi. My name is spelled there if you need to see it. And also make sure to check out Underdog Fantasy. Again, use promo code Cover1. Spend $10, get $25. I don't know how that works, but that sounds like a good deal to me. Sounds pretty good. So, Rob, anything else before we get out of here?
Nope. Tune in Monday. Football's back.
Tune in next week for Christian Wade Roundup after he scores 3 tutters to lead the Bills to a come from behind victory. It's going to be electric. We'll talk to you next week.